So Dave, maybe if you could start first, give a little background, a minute or two, and just what, your unique kind of value proposition of your company.
Thank you, Jim. Myland is a soil health company. So our focus is going into dead or severely degraded farmland, which is unfortunately ubiquitous at this point, and helping those farmers rebuild their land from the base of the food chain in the soil microbiome. We do that through a very unique service that we provide to growers. What underpins that service is on-farm technology that we tap into the power and the irrigation infrastructure, so the critical infrastructure within the farm. And then we grow live native microalgae on site. That live native microalgae is delivered to the farm whenever the farmer is irrigating their land. And that microalgae impacts the chemical, the physical, and the biological makeup of the soil. At the end of the day, we're creating aggregates, no matter what soil type we're working with. We're allowing the plant to proliferate. We're allowing the farmer to reduce their input costs. It's a holistic shift in the ecosystem. That is fundamentally what we do.
Great, thank you. And Dane, by the way, has an interesting background also as an attorney.
I was an attorney.
Yes.
I ran away from law to do this, but law is what actually provided this opportunity to me. I represented a company that was focused on microalgae for nutraceuticals, so like EPAs, DHAs. And that's when I met my co-founders, Bob Thompson and Andy Ayers. And Andy built the first Myland system literally in his front yard, put it on 200 acres of dead land in southern Arizona that was being farmed by Del Monte, or leased by Del Monte. They had abandoned it. They had a 9,000 acre adjacent ranch, and within a year, Andy had transformed that land and now producing the 9,000 acre ranch on a per acre basis. And the delta between the two was unbelievable. And that was a progressive farmer, so this wasn't biologic versus hardcore conventional. It was biologic versus biologic. Mm-hmm. So saw that when I transitioned out of law, figured out how to acquire the rights to the technology, and have been building it ever since.
Dallas Ford, can you give us some background about your company, about Inari?
Sure. Well, thank you for letting me join this discussion today. I'm actually local to this area, so I grew up about an hour north. Our family farms about 1,800 acres in that part of the world, and so it's harvest time, if you know what I mean. And but started out my career really working with the equipment side of the business, and learned a lot about distribution at that time. And that's probably a common theme that you'll hear from me as we go through this discussion, is the distribution of products into agriculture and how we go about doing that depending on the market and the actual product itself. So obviously the equipment market had a very defined distribution space. Then I moved into ag tech, and when I say ag tech, it was imagery and data platforms, data management tools, things of that nature, IoT devices that were actually installed in cabs and tractors and combines, sprayers, collecting data, and then delivering insights from that. Then I've also worked with drone imagery as well, drone sensors. And finally, we get to Inari, where I am today, and Inari is a seed design company. That's the simple discussion that we have, but we sit at the intersection of agriculture, technology, specifically advanced breeding technology. Many know it as gene editing, but I think that in some ways is kind of a misnomer. Advanced breeding technology is really the space in which we occupy, and we're looking to basically deliver differentiation and new technology to seed companies and ultimately growers that will change the food system. And how do we do that? Well, it's through a few bold goals that we have that include increasing yield, firstly. We focus right now on corn, soybeans, and wheat in that space, but increasing yield. Then we move on to things like water utilization and fertilizer utilization. Can we impact those using this type of technology, which has only been around for a few years?
How would you define innovation at your organization?
Innovation takes on a number of different definitions. I think you've got different types. You've got an invention, something that really is different or unique, and then you also have things that are interrupters, or in the ag tech world, they like to say, I'm going to disrupt this industry. You hear that buzz term quite a bit. Those are big differences in those things, and I think for ag marketers and folks that are communicating products into the marketplace, we've got to know in which space we fit. Are we really just trying to disrupt a market, or have we invented something that really is differentiated and brings value? And I think that brings value piece is such a big part of this. Can you prove a return on investment? Can you prove a differentiation from a technology? Because just changing what someone is doing today is very, very difficult. But delivering them value is something that is much easier to do.
Mm-hmm. Dane, how about you in your organization?
To build off of that, well, innovation within the organization, we don't have a definition per se, but it's been part of who we are from day one. The business was started by a former lawyer, an accountant, professional consultant, and a zoologist who fell in love with algae. So we were building a system, so hardware and software, we had no idea what we were doing, and we had no idea what was going on in the soil. We started to chip away and learn at that as we move forward. So innovation has been a cornerstone for us from the beginning, but to build off of what Dallas said, it's having an impact for the farmer and that ROI, and I love the yield, and then we focus on this because at the end of the day, it's the yield, and that's how you gain success, and then you can expand by those other impacts, but also for us, simplicity. These individuals battle so many day-to-day problems that you just can't fathom when you're in an office building the company, that if we put something out on farm that creates more of a headache for them, we're compounding that. So for us, innovation as it relates to Mylan, and I think generally in agriculture, is do you provide value to that grower, and can you simplify their existence? Maybe not much, but even a little bit can move the needle, and that's what we try to do.
And that's a good point. Maybe we jump into the AI side, because it's obviously it's predicated on data. The AI doesn't exist, without data. And I think sometimes we forget that precision agriculture or high-tech ag or ag tech is relatively recent. It's not, as you said, it's 20 years old, 25 tops. And it's only been the past 5 or 10 years where farmers have been really committed to they're keeping their data. They're capturing it, even if it doesn't seem to have immediate value. Farmers are always encouraged, no, just capture that data every year as much as you can. So maybe we talk a little bit just about how you guys see AI. And maybe before we do, I'll kind of jump in and just say, I actually, for my own personal research, talked to a software engineer at Meta, Facebook, as you guys may know him, in the virtual reality labs. I happen to know him because he's my son. But I asked him, I said, what would you say about AI in agriculture? And he said, before anything, he said, I would say first and foremost, what he calls domain knowledge is critical. And he's a tech guy. So he understands, as a tech person, you go into any field with AI and you've got to start, there's got to be a human being on the ground who is able to ground any concepts or any technologies. Otherwise, it's very useless. Tech people will just say, what do you want? What's your objective? What do you want to achieve? Where do you guys see, what's the impact of AI in ag in the immediate future?
In the soil microbiome, it's going to be difficult. And getting back to Dallas's point, we don't have a lot of data, and then there's inconsistencies within the data itself. So you look at soil labs and how they analyze a sample. Soil labs will have different techniques, different protocols, meaning you don't even have true apples to apples in that scenario. And there's very few soil labs that even are in existence today, because it's just an area that's growing. There's a lot of room to run for AI in the soil microbiome, but the data sets have to be built, consistency has to be built. So we're a ways away from getting there. I think generally though, AI is going to have an impact, and let Dallas speak about his company, for us internally and externally in how we operate within our own ecosystem. So internally, we're looking at every pocket of the business for AI to be utilized to supercharge our employees. All the way from back-end accounting to the DNA sequencing on algae and looking at characteristics and whether we can deliver something to sandy soils that might be able to create the aggregation faster. And so it's going to have a meaningful impact on us. I don't know how fast that will be. Some of the things that are plug and play in kind of your back-end corporate work are in motion today. They're not active for us, but we're actively implementing them. But as far as out in the field in agriculture, it's going to take time because there's just not a lot of data out there. And then the folks that are collecting the data, there's not an ecosystem of data sharing and having that go across different crop types, different regions, and then how does that AI layer onto that and create that efficiency and help us predict where things can go when you're basically starting from the ground up. And it's a company that's doing that because they want that technology themselves. So it's going to be a long road, I think, in agriculture because of how decentralized everything is. But there's huge potential. I love what it could potentially do in the soil microbiome. Chris Nichols is our lead scientist, and she's a renowned soil microbiologist, and she always tells the story of when she started her undergrad, one of her lead professors said we know about 2 to 3% of what's going on in the soil within the microbiome. And at the end of her 4 years, that same professor said we probably know about 1% now. So the more we learn, the less we know. And some of the things that we have learned about the microbiome are things that you didn't know before. So it's just there's a huge space to take advantage of. That AI could be a massive tool, but we're not close.
What we've done as a company is tried to approach that from a diversity perspective. So you speak about doctors. We went into the pharmaceutical industry, and we have a number of those folks from that discipline. We've got about a third of our employment that are Aggies. In my case, I call myself a high-tech redneck, but the rest of the group, about a third of that group is from other disciplines. So they come from the pharmaceutical industry, they come from academia, they come from places that we have to educate them on ag, but they bring tremendous expertise. We're also a company that's about 50-50 male to female. So we intentionally go after diversity for this, to approach challenges like this. And so far it's been very successful.
To me, the skeptic that is open-minded, that is an influencer that people listen to, that's the ideal customer. Because they're going to challenge us, they're going to force us to be better. They'll force us to evolve our service to be better. But then once you turn that skeptic, they are your strongest champion.
Yeah, right.
So that is the ideal customer. I don't care what age they are. I mean, we've worked with older farmers and younger farmers, and I mean they're all approaching it their own unique ways, and it's the skeptic.
That's interesting. So if you had kind of selected for that, you're trying to segment that customer, you might have said, well, he's too old. You know, he's probably bound to traditional chemicals. Why bother? I'm not going to prospect that guy.
Yeah, we got that guy because Andy put the pilot on Del Monte's farm, and Del Monte, when we got to acquiring the business, the technology, and then starting the business, Del Monte was scaling back its operations in Arizona. So he said, I will call 4 or 5 guys that I know and I'll tell them you need to use this. And one of the first calls he made was to Marvin, and Marvin said, sure, I'll give it a shot. And that's how we got our first customer.
Seed business has a pretty traditional model from the standpoint of testing with independent contract research organizations, CROs, also internal testing. What we try to do, especially, we are pre-commercial, so we're not in the commercial space yet, and we're working towards that point. But we work directly with the seed companies and let them have hands-on experience with the product. That seems to be the best opportunity to get, not only for them to see the product as it's being developed, but also to get feedback on what is the next step and how do we change and what directions do we need to consider as we go forward. So those relationships are key. Every organization I've ever worked for has had some sort of advisory council. Some of them were product-based, some of them were channel-based, but never underestimate the power of the folks who are actually using a product in the field and the impact that they can have by allowing them the opportunity to give you feedback. So we formalize those in a lot of cases and work with those people on a regular so that you get a relationship that you can trust, and they do too. So it works out to be mutually beneficial.
And the only thing I'd add, Jim, is another angle we've used in getting back to different stakeholders having an interest on what's going on farm, because as we're looking at climate changes and things of that nature, people are starting to focus on the soil and the impact soil can have on some of the issues we're dealing with. We just signed an agreement with and entered into a collaboration with Texas A&M AgriLife Research. So getting back to how do we validate, that'll be 12,000 commercial acres in Texas, crop variety, soil type variety, different regions. That's another angle that we're using, is working direct with agencies like that through state processes to show this is what we're doing on farm, and it's not just us analyzing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of public-private partnership seems to be a really good model, right? I mean, it's always been there to some extent, but I think maybe University Extension has gotten a bit of a revitalization, perhaps, by acting as a partner with developing companies.
Agreed. When you're an early stage company like we are and you're trying to grow, in that you can go down so many rabbit holes of trying to chase what you hope to be truth, when what you need to do is continue to focus on how do we drive an ROI for that grower, and then connect the dots, and then just chip away at learning and trying to gain a bit of an understanding of what you're doing. So for us, it's what we are doing to that soil microbiome as a whole. I mentioned earlier today that to somebody I was talking to here, we just found out earlier this week on beneficial bacteria in the soil that are nitrogen fixing. A report came back that we're having a massive impact on that population. Well, that was an ASU professor that conducted that study. That's just something we learned. So we kind of had a feeling that was happening in the soil, but now you've got that knowledge. We could have chased that 3 years ago, but I guarantee that professor is going to come back and go, well, let's do these 19 things and do a multi-million-dollar study, and we'll figure it all out. And you won't, but you'll gain knowledge. And so it's kind of going down those paths cautiously, and at the same time focusing on the farmer. So it is a virtually unexplored ecosystem, but it can also create just a waste if you're not careful.
As we educate, internally with our group that are, kind of a third from different industries, we have to almost re-educate folks that personal relationships are still a massive part of the ag industry. And myself, my brother, my father, who's in his 70s, they're all going to use cell phones and computers to find information, but they're still going to want to talk to a person and be supported by a person. And online help is not my dad's favorite thing, and he's going to want to talk to whoever it is that can solve the problem. Farmers in many cases are not specialists, they are generalists. They own businesses and they run them as a generalist, and they try to associate with people who they can trust. Trusted advisors become the delivery mechanism for many of these solutions, and that is still true. No matter how much the technology has changed to now, that is still true. Now, the younger generation that's coming in, it's going to be a bit different. They're probably even less likely to let more people into their circle, but they still have a circle of trusted advisors that they believe in, that they are going to rely on. So finding your way in or out of that circle, sometimes easy to find your way out of it. Pretty hard to find your way into it sometimes. But that's the challenge as we go forward. And then combine that with the idea that as we go forward, there's going to be fewer and fewer of these people, and they're going to control larger and larger parts of the pie. That's our challenge. That's what our businesses are going to be faced with as we go forward.